happy hour with Digifora. Cheers.
Cheers.
Hey, Justin.
I actually have mine this time. The video that we just put up, I was on the struggle bus with correctly having my beverage. So,
oh my gosh, I love doing happy hour with you because it's happy hour your time, but not mine, but I still get to participate. So it's so fun.
joys of having a East Coast, West Coast team for sure.
Yeah, I'll call you again at 5 p.m. and see where you're at.
I probably will still be having happy hour. There's a good chance.
I think drinks are full price at that time.
Not in Georgia.
8 o'clock? No?
Not in Georgia.
Wow. Well, that's exciting.
Yes.
And speaking of exciting things, that brings us to today's topic for our episode that we're discussing.
Best transition ever.
Yes. How to fire your clients well. I think it's pretty bold to speak about this. This is not something we aim to do. It's just something when you own a business and own an agency, you have to do sometimes, unfortunately. And we just have gotten to navigate this with a client, and we just want to help other agencies that are going through this that might not know how to navigate it, how to navigate it well. And we're not the experts in this topic. I hope to never be the expert in the topic of firing a client. Because again, this is a very, very rare situation. But if you do have to go through it, it's good to be able to find somebody who's gone before you and maybe take some lessons or learn from them. And so just to clarify, like, Justin is still married to his wife. I'm still engaged to my fiance. Neither of us have those types of relationship breakups to discuss, just breaking up with a client. So I wanted to get us kicked off. I found a great quote by J.K. Rowling. She says, "Indifference and neglect often do much more damage than outright dislike."
Oh, wow.
And I think that can best describe the point to where we were in our relationship with our client of not neglect, but maybe a feeling of indifference towards the efforts we were putting in versus what we were getting back in the form of being paid on time and mutual respect and showing up for meetings that the client had set and the client not showing up for those meetings. And so it brings you to this point of indifference. And I want to commend you on recognizing that early on in the relationship, just to know that this is not serving anybody well in the situation. And which brings me to my next quote that I found by Nicholas Sparks. He says, "If the relationship can't survive the long term, why on earth would it be worthy of my time and energy for the short term?"
That is so good. I mean, because we were having those emotions, but didn't couch it in that. Like, because, man, we really thought, like, with the structure even that we set this client up on, we did a structure where it actually was going to get more expensive for them along the way, because we knew we were going to be able to prove to them that we could succeed and that we could make them profitable and that we could, our biggest thing was we could grow the trust. And you'll learn to trust us, which means you'll learn or be more willing to increase your fee structure.
That's right.
And going back to your point, like, what really started creeping up in my chest, my heart, was in month 1. All of a sudden I was starting to say, I don't know if I trust this. I don't know if I trust this process. And it was more of and so you and I talk all the time that a core value, or our better way of saying it, our core value is trust.
That's right.
And that's both directions. Like, we have to trust you as a client. And that was the other part where we gave a lot of trust. There was a lot of issues that we worked through that you talked very well through, but yet they weren't willing to own their part in them, but yet they still wanted all the KPIs to be up and to the right. And
that's right. And I think most relationships have this great honeymoon phase.
Absolutely, they do.
I can't remember the honeymoon phase with this client.
No.
I don't think we had one.
We didn't, and again, like, little bit of backstory without giving too much information away and like getting us into a weird space. I've known.
What do we say, Justin? Sorry to interrupt. No shame, no names. Right?
That's right. No names. Cheers to that.
Cheers. No shame, no name. Anonymous from here on out.
This person, company, they've been a client previously for me. I've done work for them off and on for many, many years. And so going back into it, I was excited that we were going to be able to have them as a digifora client because it had been a great relationship previously. And one of the things that it taught me about getting to the point of breaking up with someone is that you also have to take in consideration as time changes, people change. And so there was a huge change that happened for them. Whatever, that's their piece, but it was not. And I think the hardest part for me thinking about breaking up was having to talk to you about, like, I think we need to break up, like,
with the client, not our business partnership, just to clarify.
And good clarification. No, with the client, because it's like, we're a young company, like we're not old enough really to be firing clients,
right?
And and they're like every company, we have a cash flow like algorithm that we're trying to stay inside of and continue to grow and all that type of stuff. And when you start firing clients, the cash flow issue changes a little bit.
Absolutely. And with that, trust is such a big issue. We were not willing to move forward knowing we did not have it. No matter what we could do with this client, we were not going to gain any more of it. It wasn't an issue that we brought to the table. We were doing our part. We were giving notes and going above and beyond. It was just, we didn't realize going into this relationship, there were other relationships happening on the side. And so we prefer monogamous partnerships with our clients. If you're looking for polygamous partnerships, that's not digifora. That does not breed trust at all. And so I think that was another key lesson that we learned in this was that, wow, we're not the only ones speaking into marketing or this area of the company. And there was a lot of conflict of ideas and ownership of things. Yeah. And I would say the full scope of what we laid out, the client really didn't get to see because they had so many other people speaking into it. And it was like, let's do all the ideas at the same time. And we can't prove to you ROI for what we are offering when there's so many different strategies at play at the same time. And so I think that's really the unfortunate thing of that relationship. But moving forward, what are some great ways that you can navigate as an agency, speaking to other agencies out there? How can you best navigate breaking up with a client? And the first thing that I have for that is, number one, just be honest. You want to talk about that email you sent? The breakup email?
It was honest. And it was more just saying, this is what, I sent an email to the client basically saying, this is what we agreed to. This is what we all came to the table and say, yes, this is what we want to happen. And we keep showing up and doing our part. And I think that's, if I'll pause on the breakup part and go back just for a second with, I know someone's watching this and saying, yeah, they probably weren't fulfilling their side of it, so they got out of the agreement. Our KPIs, we were exceeding what we told the client was going to happen. And so that's the other part. Like, just because we were winning we didn't need to stay around because we were helping them win, and that our KPIs were doing exactly what we said they would do. So, but going back to it, it's just about being honest. And so I went back to the client and basically said, the first email that I sent them is that you've not paid us on time, so we're going to stop working. And that was the first we agreed you would pay us on this date for services rendered, and you didn't, so we have to stop working. And then magically all the emails started getting responded to.
And we have a grace period if a client doesn't pay us the first time on time. We understand, like, things happen, life happens, but this was not the first time. This is not the second time. And so the mutual trust and mutual respect just didn't seem to be there. And so how much longer do you carry that out with the client? Is that beneficial towards you as the agency? And is that beneficial towards the client? Because you're not going to do your best work if you're bitter about not being paid for your work. And so it's really important to be honest. Go back to your agreements, go back to your contract, see what you said and promised you would do and what they promised they would do. Because contracts and agreements are between two parties.
That's correct.
You and the client.
That's correct.
And so don't feel like you're in this alone. If their end of the bargain is not being fulfilled either, how can you do yours?
Yep.
And so just be honest, and a great working relationship has to be great for both parties involved. That's just something key to remember.
Yep. And contracts are for in the relationship, not to keep you from a relationship. And so that's why we draw them up. And that was a pivot for me when you came on board at Digifora. Before that, we had some contracts with some clients, but most of it was, if I can't trust you and you can't trust me, I don't want to do work with you. And I realized, like, well, that's great, and we lead with that. And that's like the premise of where we start all of our conversations. But memory is a funny thing. And so if it's not written down where you can go back and point back to it, it just gets swirly. And so that's the benefit of a well-written, well-documented working agreement.
Yeah, I should tell my dad, who hired a contractor, that you need to have agreements to protect you and the contractor.
Absolutely.
That's another podcast. Love you, Dad.
Yes.
Anyway, the next thing that's important to know, so be honest with your client. Secondly, be empathetic towards your client. Put yourself in their shoes.
Absolutely.
If you were getting fired by an agency you hired and wanted the moon and the stars from, you just had all these expectations, because every client has expectations of who they're hiring and who they're putting their precious dollars towards.
Yes, they do.
It doesn't feel good to see a jerky kind of email coming your way. And so if you're honest and you're empathetic, that should show in your calls with them. It should show in the tone of your email. Do you have anything to add to that?
Well, I think that's what makes our partnership so amazing, is we joke about being Enneagram and time zone compatible. And like, there are days where I'm the frustrated one and Haley is like, we're good. Like, I got it. Like, let me deal with this. And then a few weeks later, we'll be dealing with something else with a different client. And I'm like, I got it. Like, it's good. And that's the beauty of a partnership. And that's what the client relationship should look like as well, with the empathy, in the sense that, cool, we get it. You're running behind on bill fulfillment or billing whatever, or getting us collateral. We get it. Like, there's a human element to this. And so empathy is it's a necessity. It almost has to be a requirement. So
definitely.
Yep.
And lastly, well, not lastly, I would add to the empathetic part is that it doesn't cost you anything to be generous with this relationship. And I think we were really generous in giving the client 30 to 60 day out. That might have been in the contract, but we gave the client that option. Like, we will do another 30 to 60 days. That's 2 more months with you.
That's correct.
If you need time to end this relationship, or you are worried about the work in the next few months, we will give you that option. But I think at that point, no, I will say that you give the client the option and let them make the choice.
Absolutely, you do.
You be generous with it. We didn't just say, we're only working for the next 2 weeks for you, and that's it. We're done. It was 30 to 60 days. And so let the client make that choice, but be generous with the runway out, if you will.
That's correct. I mean, in previous life, I have fired clients before and then picked them back up. And it was all because of the way that we parted ways. And like, whether or not we pick this client back up in the future, I don't know. But I always want to be able to have at least the relational equity that conversation could be had. And it reminds me many, many lifetimes ago when I was on staff working for Billy Graham. There was a lot of transition going on at the executive level. And the executive director that I indirectly answered to, his name is Tom Phillips, came by to say it was his last day and he was moving on and all these things. And I sat down and talked with him about a bunch of stuff. And one of the things that he said to me on his way out is like, Justin, whether you stay here with the association for a few more weeks or the rest of your life, just realize, like, you never want to burn the bridge back to relationship.
Exactly.
And it just has stuck with me. Like, it just, like, don't burn bridges. Don't be dumb. Even if it's been really, really bad for you. With you and I being believers, there's a faith component to that, with the way that we're supposed to treat people. And I know that you have to help me filter that, because as an Enneagram 8, I come across as I'm burning the bridge to the ground right now. And I really don't feel that in my heart. It just is, let's just deal with it. And that can come across to people sometimes unempathetic. And it's another one of those amazing just components of our working relationship.
Absolutely. And I think, yeah, like you mentioned, you want the client to eventually say, hey, I would love to give this a go again.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry
Mm-hmm.
for how it
Mm-hmm.
ended, but we would love to see if there's a way to work together again in the
Yeah.
future. I know my past jobs, people are excited to see me again when I come
Mm-hmm.
back to visit. And I know that's not the case for everybody.
It is
Sometimes
not.
they see people and they're like, ooh,
Ooh.
never want people doing that to you. Ooh, bye.
Oh, they just walked the opposite direction.
Right. So, yeah, don't burn a bridge. You don't
Yeah.
have to be cruel about how this partnership is ending unless
Mm-hmm.
maybe things get really, really ugly. But even then, I would challenge you to just be the bigger person and walk
Mm-hmm.
away with your dignity and with your head held high.
It's only awkward if you make it awkward.
Hmm.
And so that where you and I with this process, it's just we're just going to be truthful, we're going to be honest, and we're going to be empathetic. And it's not been awkward. And we've done phone calls, we did, or we're wrapping it up. Like as we had the phone calls with the client, it's very direct and it's very cordial and very kind. It didn't work out, and it's not awkward. So
It's not you, it's me. Wait, no, it was
no,
you.
it's you.
It was you this time.
It was you this time.
So be honest, be empathetic towards your client. And my last point, I think, from learning from our experience is finish well.
Absolutely.
If they give
Absolutely.
you 2 weeks left, if they give you 30 days or 60 days,
Yep.
just remind them why they hired you in those
Mm-hmm.
last days. Don't
Mm-hmm.
snub the client by not doing
Mm-hmm.
work for them. Just
Yep.
keep pushing through and keep fulfilling your end of the agreement until the
Absolutely.
agreement is done. And then you can wash your hands of it and walk away with your
Yeah.
dignity, knowing that at the end of the day, you gave your best towards this client, no
Mm-hmm.
matter how that came out for you in the end. Do we
Mm-hmm.
want to keep our clients for longer than our agreements? Of course,
Of course
but
we do.
we're all human and we know that that doesn't always happen. And relationships have two parties involved. And
Mm-hmm.
so they can
Mm-hmm.
get messy at times.
They do.
And
They do.
you don't want to be the messy part of the relationship, right?
There's always when the breakups happen, there's always a messy part. And if it it's probably you if you're wondering who it is.
Yeah. So I think clients might also expect you to behave a certain way when you end
I
an
agree.
agreement. And if you
I
can
agree.
exceed what they expect, I think you walk away winning, and maybe
Yeah.
you walk away making them think, that
Mm-hmm.
wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be.
Yep. Yeah.
Maybe
No,
there's something I'm doing that I should reflect on.
absolutely.
And that's always the
Absolutely.
goal, too.
And there's an emotional intelligence with client interaction as well. Like it may be us, like we're willing to admit that it wasn't good. And so there's that piece of it. And so for people watching this, the questions or the points that Haley just walked us through, she surprised me with them, and they've been world class and fantastic. But I want to pause and say, like with that last bullet point with finishing well, like
Mm-hmm.
with this client, you finished really, really well. Like you have done more work than we contractually should have done. And so thank you for being a business partner who doesn't just come on a podcast and talk about something. It's how you operate. Like I've gone back and looked at where are we in the ending of that, and did we fulfill, and did we did it, and above and beyond. And that's because you're a woman of integrity, and you help us lead really, really well at digifora. And like, so for everyone
Oh,
watching, like she
well,
dropped this
thanks,
on me,
Justin.
but
Cheers. Well, cheers to that.
yeah, but it's true. And that maybe that's the bigger point of this whole conversation with breaking up with a client is it really boils down to your own ethics
Yeah, absolutely.
and your own core values. And you, like I said, you're a woman of integrity, and you've led with that client because you were the point for the most part with all the interactions with them.
Yeah,
And
thanks for that, by the way.
yeah, like
I'm
it
just
just
kidding.
well, that's kind of anyways, but it goes back to your own personal core values. And so like if you're constantly firing people or firing clients, you may need to take a little bit of a sabbatical and go and look at your own core values.
Absolutely.
Because if there's a common denominator, you got to sit down and look it straight in the eyes. And sometimes we as the agency, or we as the agency owners,
Mm-hmm.
we are the common denominator. And so as we started this conversation, we were talking about how can we help other people gracefully fire or break up with someone. If you're breaking up with a bunch of people There's one person that's always in that conversation. And so,
you do not want to be. That's not a good business model, first of all.
It's not a great business model. So,
and you're probably burning some bridges along the way. So
Yeah,
just
absolutely.
things to consider. But
yeah, absolutely.
that's all the time we have today for Happy Hour with Digifora. Thank you for
Cheers.
joining us. If you have any suggestions on what you would like us to unpack in the next episode, leave that in the comments section below. Justin, any last thoughts for breaking up?
Yeah, like, just do it well. Like, you want to go to a happy hour and run into that person and be able to say hello. Just do
I agree.
it well.
You want to be able to have happy hour with them when their working relationship is over.
That's correct.
So great job. Great job today. Thank you for joining us, and we will see you next time.